So my name's Afrah, and I had applied for one of the archival and museum fellowships with the Center for Studies in Social Sciences. And before I sort of began working at the archive, I only had a very broad sense of what the material in the archive was like. And it seemed to me there was a really wide spectrum ranging from period as well as form. So right from oil paintings, lithographs, matchbox labels, bazaar art, as well as photographs, as well as film posters and all of this. So my intention before I even ventured into the archive was to sort of look at the visual material in the archive and not pay too much attention to form and period, but just kind of look at what the images of women within the archive told me. So that was kind of my quest. If I look at all the visual material in the CSSC archive, what does that say? And I wasn't only interested in looking at the visual imagery of women, but I was also kind of interested in seeing how does that correspond to history. And when I say history, I don't mean like history in the broader sense of, the specific history that I was interested in looking at is the history of women's descent. I was interested in looking at how does the visual archive and women within the visual archive, do they tell me the story also in history of women dissenting, or women choosing to live outside of what were the existing options of their time, or women who were, at the time of my proposal, what I like to call cheeky girls. So was there this idea of cheek within the visual representation in the archive? And if that didn't exist, could I do something about that? Could I remix the archive to introduce cheeky women within it? So with this sort of broad idea, I went into the archive, and I remember during my initial interview, Tapati said, perhaps you're the only cheeky person you will find in the archive. So this was the first time I was actually accessing an archive or working with material in it, and what happened was I was handed out, I don't know what I was imagining, perhaps I was imagining how we search for images online, where there's a lot of metadata and there's keyword searches and, like a Google search engine. But I was handed a lot of files, and the files had some metadata and some information printed out. Largely it said the period, which I didn't really want to take into consideration because it didn't matter for me. It said form, so lithograph, oleograph, or whatever. And it said who donated the collection, which also didn't matter to me. And sometimes it said dimensions, which was also irrelevant. So I didn't really know how to navigate the archive because I had this broad idea, but how do I cut through this data to find that idea? And the Kamalika, who works at the archive, is a walking, talking manual of the archive itself. She knows the entire material like the back of her hand. But, so she was, for example, the third fellow who's not here today, Sujan, he was working with the idea of the cities. So it was fairly straightforward. She gave him a collection of postcards, of maps. And then I would be like, Kamalika, I want to see images of women. And that's not how the images are looked at. So she said, okay, I'll give you the Piramal Kotasan series, which is a very particular image of a very particular woman. But that was not what I was interested in. I wanted to see what everyone was like, which was not possible. So I kind of panicked, and I felt my whole project is going to sink. But then what I decided to do, because I had no other option, was to just sort of look at every image in the archive. So I started doing this very, what seemed pointless at the time, activity of just looking at every image and being like, oh, woman is in it, okay, put it aside, woman is not in it, move on. And as I kept doing that, I started building a sub-archive within the archive, a sub-archive of women's images from CSSC's archive. And through that, I started seeing that I could further subcategorize that archive with another logic altogether, which was that certain themes very evidently started emerging from these images of women, and I just want to show you some of those themes.
Put you on the lights off.
Sure. How do I go to the slideshow?
Go to the slideshow. Yeah.
Okay, good. So this was one particular very, very popular series where there was always a window and a woman sitting by the window and kind of looking out with a very blank expression. Yeah? So this went into series and series endlessly. I mean, these are just not a few, it was like a huge theme, right? Okay. Then another one that I found was mansplaining. There is always a woman in the image, there is a man who's sort of giving the information, the finger is very evident, kind of goes on and on. And it was across period. So it was kind of interesting for me, and I made all these subfolders, but I didn't know what to do with them. Like, okay, this exists, but what of it? So I started playing this very simple match the following kind of game, where I started then simultaneously looking at textual history around the same time and seeing what interested me in it. So for example, oh, okay, sorry, we'll come to this later. So for example, there was a particular census data that I found very, very interesting. And I found that this census data sort of directly corresponded to what I found in the archive. There was a huge collection of matchbox labels of women performers. And I felt like that spoke to visual history in some sense. So I just sort of put them together and I said, okay, let's see what we can do. So what happened was like it was just like a playful exercise for me, and I felt like all of these things were making sense. Okay, there is a collection, there is a certain theme, etc., etc. But where I kind of found that things were complicated and when it was not so simple was when it came to the motif of books, which is not something that I entered the archive intending to explore, but it's sort of like how Rustam spoke about in the morning, where the archive kind of speaks to you and the archive reveals itself in some way. So here, I found this collection of women where there was a book in the image, but the story was not always the same. It kept confusing me in some sense. So for example, there was one series of images where women were with books and they were really involved and engaged with those books. And they felt like they were, immersed within that world of the book. Then there were a series of images where there was a book, there was a woman, but she was kind of interested in something else altogether. Or there was a series of images where the woman seemed to be rejecting the book. Right? So I didn't really know what to make of it, but that's what I ended up exploring as my project. And as I kept going, I'm just going to show you a little bit of the outcome of the project, because that will show you where it goes. So what I ended up making is a website. It's fine, it's an offline file. Oh, okay. Okay, so this is the website that I made, which is entirely from the CSSC collection, and it's kind of trying to explore the relationship between women and books in this particular late 18th and 19th century, where when I say books, I don't particularly mean education, but I mean what is the role that books had in the lives of women? Who were the women who took to books? Why were books introduced in the lives of women? Did they accept them? Did they reject them? Which books were introduced to which women? Who had access to these books? Who wrote them? Did women write books? When they did, what did they write? When they were reading, what did they read? How did they respond to those? What did they do with this newfound education? And so on and so forth. So the website is like a web comic. There's a prologue, and then it runs in. Do we have time for a small video? No? 2 minutes? Okay, then I won't show you the video. Maybe you can just. Okay. I know, but I have some. beginning of women's history, and the rest of the project is where you can really go through period-wise what happens. All of the images from the are from the archive, and there's bits of video, there's comics, and you can further find out more about a story by clicking through and notes and all of this. But what I've largely intended to do is use the idea of remixing the archive. What exists and what can we make out of it by really like breaking it apart to tell a whole other story.